Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude, and tonight's topic is classified research at the University of Hawaii, I might add. And we have two guests to help us with the discussion. Gary Fuller, he's a professor of geography, professor emeritus of geography, and he was director of population studies at UHM. And Ruth Dawson, professor of women's studies, also at UHM. Welcome. And what I thought we'd do to frame the discussion is go to a segment that with Mike Hamnet, who is the executive director of RCUH, Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii. And then we can have the full discussion after that one. So we'll watch.
3 classified projects. The Maui High Performance Computing Center is one. There's one other one for the College of Engineering, and then there's one spin-off project that was a UH project that started that will finish in September. Those are the only 3 that we're supporting right now. And again, it's administrative and fiscal support. We're not actually doing the research itself. Part of what precipitated the current discussion is a development of a proposal for a university-affiliated research center. I think that's been under development for some time now. I think it officially went to the BOR in I can't remember if it was December or January, and the BOR said that you know, the university administration should consult with the faculty and at the same time, because the University Affiliated Research Center has the potential to do classified research. That's one of the things they're talking about. Then the Vice President's office went and asked the faculty to revisit the existing classified research policy. So it's the UARC proposal that's kind of brought everything to discussion. The third issue is military research, and that's separate but related to the proposal to have a university-affiliated research center, as well as the possibility that some of that research could be classified. There's quite a bit of DoD research that's being done, being sponsored by the DoD at the University of Hawaii, that's neither classified nor associated with the University Affiliated Research Center, which is, at this point, it's just a proposal.
So Gary, you have done classified research at the university, and you have experience before you came to the university. So what is your take on, given your experience, on classified research in terms of the university?
Well, let me clarify that first. I never did classified research on campus.
Yeah.
If I had, I'd now be in Fort Leavenworth, because the security involved with classified research is such that it must be done in a secure facility. Yes, in 1985, I was named a scholar in residence in Washington, and I was assigned to the Directorate of Intelligence, and within that, in the Office of Global Affairs. Mm-hmm. And I had no anticipation before I went that I would be doing classified research. However, and this is an important point, I think, in overall discussions, it took over a year to gain security clearances so that I could, in fact, undertake this research project. The research project ended up much more positive than, frankly, I thought it was going to. At the time, Ronald Reagan was President of the United States. My primary research interest is in the field of population. Reagan hated the very word population. Somehow he associated it with abortion, and so you couldn't do anything in terms of population. But I was very fortunate with some support from some high-level people in the State Department and the intelligence community. My research went forth, and I say immodestly that the report I did was the most read, the most quoted report in the history, the modern history of the intelligence agencies in Washington. It's still being quoted. You can still every now and then see in the press. Eventually, my work became unclassified, and I was able to report it in professional journals, just as anyone else might do. I enjoyed hearing what Mike Hamnet had to say about it. I thought some of the divisions that he made were quite useful for discussion. But I think one of the issues that needs to be made right away, and arises from what you said earlier, once you do classified research on campus, you create a separate class of individuals that are doing the research. They are selected apart from the faculty. The requirements may differ. In my case, I had to be a U.S. citizen to do that. Yet 1/3 of my colleagues that I work with regularly at the university are not U.S. citizens. If I were doing classified research on campus, I would be separated from them in some very fundamental and important ways. I don't think that ought to happen. I don't think that's part of what the university is supposed to be. I don't think we're set up to, we have enough divisions as it is, Lord knows, without setting up that kind of division.
Yeah.
Well, that I've said probably enough at the moment.
Well, yeah, what I'd like to do is I interviewed Maida Chesney Lind, and she talks about the impact of classified war research on the university and so on. And it's about 3.5 minutes, but I think it's worth playing it at this point, and then we come to you, Ruth. Okay.
Well, first of all, I think Professor Kim and I are longtime members of the faculty, and you know, we have a deep commitment to the University of Hawaii, and we both feel very privileged to be able to be, in a sense, stewards of this very cherished institution, which is the University of Hawaii. And it's a very precious resource to the state, to the students and the parents of the students that attend all 10 of our campuses. So, you know, we're dealing here with an incredibly scarce and precious resource, which is higher education for the state of Hawaii. And what we got concerned about was there seemed to be a kind of, you know, we call it a rush to judgment about permitting a kind of research on our campuses that would really jeopardize the integrity of the institution that we've spent our life building and sustaining. So we have to start with helping people to understand, first of all, what a great place the University of Hawaii is. And I've taught on at least 2 campuses, maybe more if we started counting all the other stuff I've done. I know what a great institution this place is. I also know that we do a quality job of educating our students. And I think that's where we begin, is we talk to people about, well, if we started doing secret or classified research for the U.S. military on this campus, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to the students who come here? What does it mean to the faculty who work on such projects? What does it mean to the staff who are secretaries or you know, APTs on those kinds of projects? Well, basically what it means is bad news for them. And, you know, we can talk about some of the specifics, but let's talk first about the students. I mean, students come here to start building a great career for themselves. And what you're trying to do as an undergraduate, and particularly as a graduate student, is you're beginning to build a track record academically of sterling achievement. And you're looking to have relationships with professors who are going to get you involved in exciting research. And, you know, as a person who does research on this campus, I know how synergistic it is to work with bright graduate students. We get the great ideas from them, the fresh perspectives. And the other side of it is, of course, they get to begin to do research, collect data, and then begin to publish that research in journals and, you know, peer-reviewed collections, in books. And all of that is the kind of stuff you can't do if you do classified research. So I think, you know, that's where I begin, is as a researcher and as a member of the faculty, to have grave concerns that our students are going to be harmed. Well, number one, international students can't participate at all, which is a huge chunk of the campus, and one of the great reasons to come to the University of Hawaii is we have such diversity, and the diversity extends past the ethnic diversity into the international nature of the campus. All of those folks are walled off from this kind of activity. So I think, you know, the secrecy is corrosive, and then past that we could get to some of the other issues around the militarization of the campus, which I think is also a concern. You know, this is a very militarized island already. It's a very militarized state. Do we want to keep going down that road, or do we want to look for new ways to live and be here in Hawaii? But we just start with our essential mission, which is to create new knowledge and to share that and disseminate that knowledge. That's the fundamental reason to have a university. And that's precisely the kind of activity that you can't do if you're doing secret, classified war research for the U.S. military.
Yeah, so these are some of Maida's concerns, and she and Carl Kim authored that letter And a number of faculty signed it. I think over 100 faculty
That's right.
members signed that. So Ruth, would you like to comment on both segments and also on what Gary said
Right.
as well? Yeah.
Yes, well, I think that Gary and Mita have made some very important points about the what the mission of the university is, and whether this other activity actually can be made to mesh with the mission of the university. And I think there's some big questions about that in a number of different ways. The university would be asked in the UARC not just possibly to do classified research, as Mike Hamnett kind of indicated, but definitely to do classified research. In fact, when this was first presented to the Faculty Senate, of which I'm a member, one of the early questions was, could we accept the UARC but say we won't do the classified research component?
Yeah. Just to say, a university-affiliated research center, that's the UARC.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And also like Gary Ostrander, who's the Vice Chancellor for Research.
Yes.
He said something about he expects about 15% of what UARC might be handling would be classified research.
That's right.
But that's a significant chunk of the UARC.
Well, mostly, it is definitely a significant chunk, and especially we asked, could we have this agency on our campus, but say no classified research, and the answer was no. The acceptance of classified research as part of the UARC is presented to us as a fundamental requirement, which tells you that it's a very important part.
Yeah. There's also Ronald Sega, who's Director of Research, Military Research.
Right, Director of Defense Research and Engineering.
Yeah, he has an interesting quote. I don't know if you would like to
Oh, I have the memo here.
Yeah, to give you an idea about what you were saying, to just back up what you were saying. Yeah.
Well, it's a very interesting memo. It's from July of 2004, and it's a memo in which he's talking about making the University of Hawaii at Mānoa into a UARC. And he summarizes by saying, I look forward to seeing this intriguing basic and applied ocean science and astronomical technology. I look forward to seeing all of that improve the system performance of DoD weapon systems. So one of the concerns definitely is about the role of the university in the production and improvement of weapon systems. Is that something that we should do, that we need to do, that it's right for us to do? Does it match our mission? I'm not saying that nobody should do that, but there are corporations that have that as their mission. There are other branches of the government that have that as their mission. And it seems to me to have nothing at all to do with the mission of the University of Hawaii, or at least we need to ask ourselves.
Right, yeah. So Gary, any comments on?
Yeah, I agreed with much of what Mita had to say, but I also disagreed with a portion of it.
Yeah.
Let's face it, classified research is not only valuable, it's essential. The Defense Department is concerned about its weapon systems. Whether you and I are concerned about them or not, the Defense Department is.
Yes.
And it makes sense to have the best possible people working in these projects. So what we're talking about is whether that should be done on campus or not. I've already indicated I don't think it should be, but I want to make it clear I think that research is absolutely vital and important to the United States, to me personally, for that matter. Where Mita is incorrect, I believe, is in suggesting that once someone does classified research, they're not talking to anyone else. There's not the kind of publication and so on. Actually, the publication in the intelligence community is monumental. I'm not going to suggest there are as many journals in there as there are in Hamilton Library, because God knows these journals are proliferating all the time, but there are a great many sources for classified research publications. And yes, and I'm an example of it, people move into that literature and they move out of it into the scholarly literature as well. I think that part is a very healthy part of the overall deal, in the sense that university people are, we hope, among the brightest and the most creative people. We would like them, please, working in things that are vital world peace, to defense, to understanding what goes on in the world. It's simply that, as Mita has said, we don't want to create a different class of people on campus.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and as Ruth was saying, there are corporations that have that research, and that's their mission. And people from the university, if they want to do it, they might they can do it, outside the university. I mean, it has happened. A number of people. I mean, you as an example. Yeah. So, anything else?
Well, I would just reconfirm that too. I personally do not take offense at all of this kind of research. My question is about locating it at the university.
Yes, yeah.
And I do think that it's very interesting that Gary was able to do this kind of groundbreaking work that he did, and still maintain his university ties, but he was not doing it here.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so, I don't want to withhold our skills and our talents, but I don't want the university to be adversely affected by that.
Yeah, because I mean, this university is a public university. This notion about, if I don't allow, for instance, Gary to do something, supposing you are not Professor Emeritus now, that you are, I don't want to allow you to do research here, then I am impinging upon your freedom. I mean, that is, I think, some kind of a disingenuous argument, so far as I'm concerned, because you are free to do it outside, but not here, given the nature of the public institution and the larger mission that it has, educating the people and all those things that go along with it.
I certainly agree 100% with that. There are those, and I think of Professor Fisher, for example, in social work. If for no other reason that he writes such long letters, I can't help but notice what he has to say. He's opposed to classified research in general. I think that's a narrow and destructive viewpoint. Classified research is important. It's even important for perspectives that he is pushing, that we understand the world a lot better than we do now, and that can help. I would never have been able to do my research in basic demography without the resources of the intelligence community, their computer resources, their databases, and so on. So, yes, the research is vital. I don't think it belongs on campus.
Yeah. I just want to remind our viewers that we would welcome your questions, comments on Oahu 956-5670, Neighbor Islands 1-800-342-7949. So we'd love to hear from you. I'd like to go to another segment from Mida's interview. And I asked her, why is this whole hullabaloo about this at this point, and this controversy, meaning about the research. So we'll watch that and then we can discuss more.
Well, actually, it's an interesting question. I'd say this has been a dispute that some of us have kept our eyes on really for decades. The Faculty Senate and the Board of Regents during the last really controversial war that the U.S. was involved in, during the Vietnam War, basically said, we're not doing any more of this kind of secret research as the University of Hawaii. You're correct that in the intervening decades, some individual faculty in their private time could get involved in classified research and did get involved in classified research. But as the University of Hawaii, they did not get involved in classified research. By the, I'd say, mid-1990s, people begin to come back to the University of Hawaii because, again, they recognize the intellectual capital that's here. They recognize the intellectual vitality. This is where the new science is. There's just a lot going on here. And the U.S. military begins to approach certain individuals on the campus to establish secret research again on the campus. Sadly, we lost a couple of key rounds early on. Some of this was very subtly done. Changes were made in Board of Regents policies that no one understood the importance of. Things around what's called proprietary research, and I don't want to bore your viewers with the details here, but basically there were some stealth maneuvers within Board of Regents policies that those of us who were watching the classified research piece of Board of Regents policy didn't understand was going to start jeopardizing our ban. The second thing was the Maui supercomputer. And literally, I think the Faculty Senate, which was then the body that I was a part of and I thought was going to represent faculty interests, dropped the ball on this one. They let the Maui supercomputer be approved.
Yeah, so she gave us like a history of this whole thing about classified research. But Joel Fisher, whom you have invoked, he's on the air. So Joel, go ahead and we'll have a good discussion. You're on the air.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for discussing this very important issue. And I was a little taken aback to hear Professor Fuller mention my name in vain, I would say, and had mentioned that he had read some letters to the editor or other things that I had written, and so couldn't help but respond to what I had written by completely misinterpreting and misunderstanding what I had written. I'm surprised to hear him say that he had read it, but because if he had read it, he didn't understand it. The gist of what I've said has amounted to three arguments. One, if we don't want it on campus because it's too dirty or too unseemly or too unethical, we have absolutely no right as an institution, as a university, to foist it off on the community without any prior consultation, asking the community for its ideas on this, and letting it stay out of our hair as though it's too dirty for us at the university. Second, I've said almost nothing about classified research. I've talked about a subcategory of classified research, which is military research, which has nothing to do with the defense of our country. It has to do with the aggressive wars that our country has been conducting on otherwise almost helpless people. So it's military research that I'm concerned about, and it's the military research that is going toward, as Professor Dawson said, towards the development of more effective weapons systems which are being used to destroy third world countries as we speak. And the third issue has to do with the total lack of sensitivity to the Native community in Hawaii, the Native Hawaiian community, and the sense of desperation that the community feels about the over-militarization of their own lands, with this being simply the latest instance of trying to foist off on the Native Hawaiian community one more piece of dirty military research. So I wonder if Professor Fuller or either of the other two folks, Professor Dawson or Professor Aoude, would like to comment on those issues. But I'd particularly like to hear Professor Fuller do a little backing and filling on his comments about what I've written.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thank you very much. So now you can listen to our discussion of that. So anything, Gary, you want to say?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I did read what he had written, and I understood it to the extent that anyone could understand what he had written. I just don't see an issue with issues of Native Hawaiians. I just can't see the relationship. And I fundamentally disagree with him. If we're going to talk about weapon systems, Professor Fisher apparently thinks we should have ineffective weapon systems. I mean, I'd be perfectly happy not to have weapon systems at all. But by golly, if we're going to have them, I think they should be effective. I think that's the purpose of the Department of Defense.
Okay, good. Ruth, anything on that?
Well, yeah. Let's see. It's hard to know exactly how to tackle these questions, but I probably am in disagreement here with Professor Fuller because I do strongly feel that it's not right that the university itself should be establishing units which have as their function the development and improvement of weapon systems. I don't think that I'm saying thereby that we shouldn't have effective weapons. I'm trying to say that when we devote our resources to the improvement and development of weapons, we're actually taking resources away from non-military activities, moving them into military activities. And I don't think that that's right. And I actually feel as though the university administration acknowledges that in a number of rather backhanded ways. Because, for instance, in the new proposed classified research policy that is circulating right now, they have a very interesting statement about, they're trying to justify when we would do classified research, and they say that to meet our responsibilities, faculty members conduct research into the application and utilization of knowledge for the benefit of mankind. The development of new and improved technological applications and the utilization of these innovations in agriculture, industry, business, and other areas of need. Now, somehow or other, it seems to me as though they're working as hard as they can to make this sound like something that is good, without ever indicating that there's anything military about it. And there, of course, are forms of classified research that are not about the military. But when we're thinking about starting a whole institute, a research center that would be focused on military matters, and that's what's at stake right now, and they've written this policy right now, it seems to me to be an acknowledgement that somehow they know this isn't quite right.
Yeah. But I heard from some Native Hawaiians that they're opposed to having classified research, especially military stuff in the community. I mean, so they have an issue with it. Maybe not all Native Hawaiians, but some of them.
Oh, yes.
But at any rate, I just wanted to let you know that there is that kind of discussion among Native Hawaiians. What I like to do is I like to go to another segment of Mike Hamnitz, and he talks about the RCUH and also on the question of classified research, and then we can expand the discussion.
The University Affiliated Research Center is a potential conduit for federal funding, for non-classified funding from the Office of Naval Research, which is who the university is talking to about this. And I think they see that there may be access to contracts and grant money for faculty to do work on things that would otherwise not be available to them. Some people think that there will be no increase in the volume of research dollars that actually comes as a result of this thing. I just don't know. But I think some members of the board feel that there are potential advantages to having this University Affiliated Research Center as a sort of a standing agreement between the Navy and the University of Hawaii. And I also understand that other agencies can use that agreement to provide money to the University of Hawaii. That it's a simple conduit for perhaps for competitive grants as well. But I think that's where people see the advantages of it. One of the difficulties is that we're dealing with too little information about what that whole thing is going to look like. And there's all kinds of speculation about what it's going to be and what it's not going to be, and I just don't know myself.
Well, I mean, he makes a few good points here, Mike. So would you like to comment on that?
Well, I really do think the discussion on this whole matter, whether we're talking about classified research in general or military research in particular, probably should be put in a broader context that Mike Hamnett represents, and that's the research grant generally. Universities today are driven by this kind of idea, oh, well, you're up, get me a grant, please. It drives so much. I mean, we've come to the realization that state governments can't fully support state universities. Students can't fully fund the university with their tuitions, although we're asking to pay a little more, I guess, in the near future. And therefore, the grant becomes all important. This is a major transition that has occurred in my professional lifetime. I worked did my graduate work in a department that allegedly was the best in my discipline in the United States at the time. No one ever had a grant. I mean, it's something that wasn't sought. In fact, when the issue was raised, people would say, oh, the government shouldn't have any right to interfere or direct my research in any way. Now we take it for granted. The classified research, as Mita has suggested, has sort of crept in because there's a lot of money involved with it. But I really think universities in general, and I'm probably the only person in the world that thinks that way, I think they ought to really question this allegiance for grant seeking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that point. I mean, the grant is now being taken for granted, as, as you said. You know? But Ruth, on that.
Yes, I think that Gary is making a very interesting point there. I think one of the complications is that a lot of the kind of work that is going to be supported probably by this new outfit is what I call big science. A lot of people call it big science. It's very expensive. So some of this work requires enormous investments. And the state of Hawaii doesn't have that kind of money to support it. So the researchers on this campus, some very distinguished people, indeed are completely or almost completely reliant on grants that they get from various sources. In fact, a lot of them are getting them from the Department of Defense. So, a lot of research being conducted on this campus is already Department of Defense research, but it's not classified. So I think one of the things that's happened, and I'm not completely sure about this, but I think what has happened is that organizations like the National Science Foundation, which used to get kind of budgets that grew over time, have now only barely been keeping up with inflation. And the Department of Defense is giving out more of the grants that previously would have come from other branches of the university. The National Science Foundation does not sponsor classified research.
And you know, like Mike Hamnet is talking about, well, he doesn't know what UARC is going to do, you know. And is it going to be like classified, not classified, how much of it is classified? But as I mentioned earlier, Vice Chancellor of Research for this campus, he said, you know, from his experience, about 15% of UARC would be classified. So that, you know, I mean, from the research that they do. And that is, I think it's a big chunk, I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that it's not really right that we don't have the kind of information that Mike was talking about. I don't think that's because the information doesn't exist. Somehow it's just been extremely difficult to get it. There are UARCs at 4 or 5 other universities. They do have guidelines that they have to meet. I'm not sure that Mike is right when he says that this UARC could serve as a kind of conduit for all kinds of research. I think that's not correct. The Department of Defense has been trying to get UARCs under control, and they do not want to have them be doing all kinds of work. They are limited to the 4 areas of competency that are originally identified.
And also, if it is conduit for other kind of research, then is that the only conduit? Or would there be a more effective and efficient conduit without all these ethical questions arising as to, you know, their function and so on? So do you have any?
Yeah, I think Ruth is right on the big science issue. It's very, I mean, you know, science is basically history of finding ways to make better observations and then comparing those observations with reality. And as the scope of our research has grown greater on the one hand and smaller on the other, it's become increasingly expensive to develop the instrumentation that's necessary for this. But once again, the classified research part on campus bothers me, whether it's big science or not. There are many important things in the social sciences. We all happen to all be from the social sciences, from the College of Social Sciences at least. There are important topics there that are not being funded. I'm particularly bothered by items that, or lines of research that deal with historical problems of any kind. Funding agencies have almost completely written those out, and I think that's a major flaw. We need to understand our heritage, whatever it is, a world, a global, national heritage, and we need to be able to impart that to our students. When we favor big science and ignore information and theories in, well, let's call them humanities as well as the social sciences, we're making some very short-sighted decisions in terms of education generally.
Yeah, and you'll have people who are maybe very good in a particular field, but ignorant about others, and they don't have that global understanding of things. I mean, in terms of the academic experience, yeah, and of the global experience, as well. So these are important things. One thing you mentioned about relating to big science and the investment that that demands, and the state of Hawaii doesn't have that kind of money. But just to establish the UARC, it requires what, $6 to $8 million?
That's right.
I mean, just right off the bat, we can do any number of things with that
That's
money
right.
at this point. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That is another, I think, major question. The UARC is being presented to us as something which will be financially self-supporting, but that's only once it gets started. The startup funds are going to come from RTRF funds, which those are return on, okay, I'm not sure I can reconstruct the exact acronym there, but it's money which has often, in fact, been used internally to make rather small grants to precisely some of the fields that Gary was talking about. Yeah. And so money indeed is going to be taken away from some of those areas to invest on behalf of the military. It's a very interesting question about whether that's the best thing for the university.
And I want to bring in one other thing in terms of the relationship between this kind of classified research and the speeding up, shall we say, of privatization of the public institution. So any thoughts on that, Gary or Ruth?
Well, it's interesting. It seems to me the medical school seems to be in the same position you're saying a UARC would be in. That is, they've done a lot of infrastructure development. They've gotten right up to the point, and now they're short of money.
Yes.
Again, it's amazing how these things seem to happen, and we will bleed one part of the university to pay for another. That's what it boils down to.
That's right, and the amount that they are short is somewhere around $6 million, which is the lower edge of the figure of what it's going to cost to start the UARC. The amount of money that the UARC is pretty much guaranteed to bring in is about $50 million over 5 years, so $10 million a year. That sounds like a lot when you're trying to run a medical school or something, but this is the bizarre thing. In terms of big science, it's not a lot. So we would actually not be a big player. We'd be a very, very small player.
Yeah, unless we're willing to spend more and more millions. Yeah,
that's right.
We have a caller from Kailua, Manu Kaiala, I suppose. You're on the air.
Aloha kako.
Aloha.
Hi, I've been listening to your conversation. I mahalo all of your comments with regards to the Native Hawaiian perspective. None of you are qualified to actually talk about that. So I thought I might call in and let Professor Fuller know a little bit more about how we feel. I'm speaking not only for myself, but for 81 other Native Hawaiians across the Mānoa campus of the Kuali'i Council. We came out against the idea of having a UARC established at the university, and actually our resolution was against having a UARC established anywhere in these islands. And, you were talking a little bit, Dr. Fuller, about heritage, and that's exactly what we're talking about. We're not talking about scientific heritage. We're talking about Native Hawaiian heritage. We're talking about the 4 areas of competencies that they talked about in looking at establishing a UARC at the University of Hawai'i, and those 4 areas are all-encompassing. I have to disagree with you, Ruth, when you say that they're pretty limited in focus. For us, they hit all of our aumakua. They hit the skies, they hit the ocean, and they hit the aina. And for those of you to say, yeah, it's not good to have this classified research on campus, and we don't want to limit people in their research activities, so we go ahead and we'll let them do it off campus. The problem for us Native Hawaiians is off campus means in our communities. It never means in Kahala. It means in our communities, in Waianae, in Makua. we've already had the ramifications of classified research and the pollution and the degradation it has done to our Aina and to our oceans. Just yesterday, I read an article about the Navy investigating perhaps some dolphin that got washed up and beached themselves on the shores were because of the Navy research done over in the ocean the day before. How much more do we have to take? We need to preserve our environment. Hawaii's too small for this. There should be no classified research in this Aina at all, ever.
Yeah, thank you, Manu. Yeah, thank you very much.
Mahalo.
Yeah, mahalo. You know, I have on the Elmo to show that there's quite a bit of controversy and also quite a bit of interest in this classified research issue. So I have a few things that I want to show on the Elmo, just like from, well, here one is from Honolulu Weekly, Navy Blues top classified military research at the University of Hawaii. And then a couple of them from the University Press, yeah, UH Rethinking Research Policy, and here they talk about the Board of Regents and so on. And then the third one, which was an interesting one, it's a cartoon, not a cartoon, sorry, a photo. A student set UARC seminar. And this guy loves secrecy. So here it is, like just like the interest on campus and off campus in the community about classified research. Okay, so what I want to do now is like maybe go to another segment that from the interview with Maida Chesney-Lind, and she talks about this issue going to the Board of Regents, and that's an interesting that the Board of Regents is looking at those issues, policy and so on.
You know, I have seen the proposal that went to the board, and this was another interesting thing. This proposal that went to the Board of Regents without any faculty review that I can discern at all went in midsummer. That's, as you and I know, being members of the faculty, that's a standard administrative trick, is to push these things through when the faculty are off duty and to hope no one notices. And then this was one of these, it was almost like an Alice in Wonderland situation where, you know, you have the support gathering and the consultation process after the decision's been made. And in a sense, our administration, I think, really went a very long way making this decision and cutting deals with particularly the U.S. Navy. We've seen memos that suggest the U.S. Navy already thinks we are an applied research lab. But the fact of the matter is the consultation process is going on right now, and I think I'm quite encouraged actually that there's been the amount of dissent that there's been, but there has been every effort made to silence that dissent, to cut it off, to expedite the process of approval. And so I think one of the reasons that we initiated this rogue campaign, if you will, is that we felt that a lot of faculty and a lot of opposition that was out there had no forum within which to express their concerns. And we just hope the Board of Regents understands the depth of concern that exists on behalf of, we're now at over 100 faculty and staff signatures. Some of these are very prominent members of our faculty too.
Yeah, so there's like quite a bit of resistance and displeasure with the notion of classified research, whether military or not, on campus, precisely for the reasons you have indicated. So any comments on Maida's, Gary?
Well, I'd like to ask you a question. We've heard from one person representing Hawaiian students on campus. I have not found a great deal of interest in this matter among the students that I teach. I just wonder if you folks have encountered this. I mean, are there, in fact, is there a lot of interest in it?
Yeah, well, from my experiences, among native Hawaiians, there is, on campus and off campus, because, I have some in the Ohana who are native Hawaiian as well. So they have this opposition to it. But in terms of the general student population, some are opposed to it, and others don't have any opinion, perhaps because they're not into the discussion at this point. But I think it might be a good idea to, in our respective classes, and you're lucky you're not going to be able to do it anymore, to raise those questions. For instance, I teach a course on the Middle East. I mean, it'll be interesting to look at that in relationship to what's happening on the Middle East. And teach another course on Hawaii's political economy, and therefore, maybe, what does this classified research have to do with the political economy of Hawaii and Hawaii's people, So it'll be good to do so, I think. You're in women's studies.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I have had a couple of discussions with my students, too. I think they find the issues very complicated. The whole business about classified research, about secrecy is confusing, and there's so many different versions of classified, and there's so many different things to take into account. And of course, the students are concerned about defending their country and supporting supporting the American military in certain respects. But at the same time, they are also, they're a little confused about what the implications would be for the campus. So I think that there's a kind of worry, but it's not very widespread yet because a lot of students haven't found out about it.
That's my sense, generally. But also, I mean, among faculty, a lot of them, on both sides of the issues, they're not sure of all the issues involved in that.
Well, it's because it's a basic issue of academic freedom.
Right.
I mean, if someone wants to work off campus on a project, then he or she is entitled to do that. I mean, that's a basic freedom that we respect and always have among our faculty members. But on campus is another matter, as we have said repeatedly. I'd just like to point out to you that I still am teaching. I have 90 students this semester. So
you're not really tired yet.
We have had only limited discussion in our class on the issue. And I have not found anyone, as you suggest, both of you suggest, I haven't found anyone with sharp opinions on either side of that issue.
So, I mean, so that's why we need more discussion of it. And I think the Board of Regents has to take the lead in this kind of thing, and make sure that the administration does so. So that, like, with everything, not like, some things they don't provide answers to or don't provide information on. Let them provide information on everything, because this is a critical issue for Hawaii.
Right, I think so too. I wanted to pick up on something that Manu mentioned, and that is about where this research might be done if it's off campus. The board of Regents was provided with a list of possible sites. And I think it's very likely it would not be at one site only. It probably would be at several. The places that they list include the Manoa Innovation Center up the road here in Manoa Valley, the Institute for Astronomy, which is also in Manoa Valley, Kawalo Basin, also
Community college somewhere.
Some kind of a lab that HCC has at EVA.
I'm not sure where the lab is, but it's part of HCC.
That's right. And then there's also a facility on Kauai. So I think it's very likely that it would be at more than one spot, it sounds like to me.
But is it like already a done deal?
That's of course a good question.
Yeah, I mean, this is the $64 million question.
The Navy people are here this week to talk with the university again. So.
And I don't think it should be a done deal at this point. So if like a lot of influentials on campus and elsewhere are pushing for it, I don't think that's the way to go. It has to be open discussion, with full, complete information. Because that's the main point, it seems to me. Because there's a lot of, opposition, it seems, among Native Hawaiians, just from what Manu was saying on campus, at least. But also, I know from outside campus, not necessarily every Native Hawaiian, but I mean, these are people who are in activist organizations who have a sense of what's going on, and they have a stake in this. So it is, something that they need to.
She made a
work
very
on.
articulate statement, but I happen to disagree with it fundamentally. I will give her, however, that one of my first experiences in Hawaii, I taught a course at Hickam Air Force Base, and I happened in class to have pilots who were largely dive bombers and who were bombing an island in the Pacific chain. The thing that really infuriated me was that they were bombing them and they didn't know what the name of the island was. The closest anybody came to it was Kalavi, Kalavi Island. And I thought that the issues of sensitivity
Right.
are really very important.
Yeah, that's
but contrary to what she did say, I would be willing to bet her a manapua that there is classified research right now in Kahala. In fact, I could take her to the place where it's done. So that's completely a red herring. Those places that she mentioned have been unfortunate sites of military intrusion and conflict between military and local values, and I fully appreciate that. We're talking about research now in the places that you mentioned. They're not polluting kind of research. They're think tanks kind of idea, as opposed to development of military weapons.
So Mike, I asked him about the downside of this kind of research. So we'll watch that.
In terms of the downside, there is this whole history of sins that the military and the federal government have visited on the Hawaiian people and others, and many of those things couldn't happen today. They couldn't happen whether it's classified research or unclassified research. Things like the bombing of Kaho'olawe, politically that just wouldn't happen today. People brought up about experiments with Agent Orange. The Environmental Protection Agency wouldn't let that happen today. It's against the law. And the fact that it's classified, all of the laws of the United States and the state of Hawaii and the city and county of Honolulu would apply to any research that's whether it's classified or not. It doesn't matter. So that's where I think there are a lot of, there's a lack of understanding about the breadth of things that are actually classified. There's a lack of understanding about the distinction between classified sources of information, like the submarine data, and actually knowledge that's produced that becomes classified. That's a distinction that most people, they all see it as one thing, and there are different rules that apply to those things.
Yeah, I mean, they're not bombing Kaho'olawe, but there's Makua Valley. I mean, they're doing exercises and, other places as well. But anyway, I wanted to ask him, what's the downside? And that's what he said. If anyone has,
Well, I guess we have to ask ourselves whether he's right that it couldn't happen today, that these things couldn't happen today. A lot of the checks and balances that are supposed to control these things are contaminated when they get involved with classified research. The people who serve on the committees that are supposed to be reviewing these things either are not given the full information because it's classified, or they all have to have high-level security clearances. And Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, has just had a very instructive experience in which one of their research projects at their Lincoln laboratories has been accused of being fraudulent, and MIT itself has not been allowed to investigate that fraud charge. The people who were supposed to be on the investigative committee included the president of MIT, who had the right level of security clearance. So did the other 4 members have the right level, but the agency in charge did not give them permission to investigate the
even
allegations.
They had security clearances.
They had security clearances because even if you have the security clearance, you still have to have what they call need to know.
Need to know, okay. Well,
and without
we
that,
don't need to know.
That's right.
Okay, I'd like to go to the interview with Maida as well, and she talks about more issues in regards to classified research.
Yet there's no dangerous a place on the face of the globe than between most of our colleagues and a $1 bill, unfortunately. And researchers are very prone to, want to get more contracts and want to get more grants. And, that's part of how we're programmed, so I sort of respect it. But I also understand that there's a dark side to that, and that is, you know, if you're working on a line of research, there's a temptation to take almost any money that's offered you. So really, we have to be a bright line there between the researcher that wants to keep their research project alive and wants to keep their students employed. We have to be the bright line that says, yes, you can do that, so long as the work you do doesn't jeopardize the fundamental institution that you work with and are a part of. And that's where we step in, and we have to say to our colleagues, and this is painful, these are all people that I know and respect, I think what you're now proposing to do jeopardizes the fundamental quality of the institution of which I'm a part. And let me say one other thing about the dangers involved with this kind of choice. If the University of Hawaii gets publicly affiliated with war research, with classified research, the next time an anthropologist goes out and works in Indonesia, for example, as happens from our campus, works in places in the world that are deeply suspicious of the U.S. military, they can no longer hide behind the academic cloak of, you know, objectivity, they're going to be in danger because of their affiliation with the University of Hawaii. This isn't an academic thing for us at the University of Hawaii. It might be an academic thing at some other campuses, though I doubt it increasingly. But at our institution, you know, I've known people who do research in the Philippines. I know the kind of risk that they might run if they tried to go back into certain areas of the Philippines or Indonesia and say, you know, I'm with the University of Hawaii. They're going to be people who are just going to connect those two dots and say, well, then you must be, you know, representing the U.S. military. We're not talking about a hypothetical risk here for some of our faculty. And whether you're doing, you know, research on art forms in Indonesia, as some of our colleagues are, you're looking at, you know, any other aspect of the culture. You may have nothing to do with the classified work that's being done on this campus, and you could be tarred by that brush.
Okay, before we have discussion, I want to go to what Mike Hamlet said on the question of faculty doing research on their own time outside the university.
Yes, some universities have a policy, and UH could have this policy too if it wanted to, where faculty can do classified research on their own time, but they can't do it as faculty members and they can't do it on university time. That's fine, but that means that the university and the faculty have absolutely no control, no oversight, or no oversight of what those faculty members are doing. So if a faculty member on his or her own time is out doing classified research and there's a major problem, environmental problem or whatever it is, that person is still going to be seen by society as a university faculty member. And yet the university will not know what the heck that person's doing. If the university has a system for oversight, which there is provision for that in the policies that exist now, then the university at least knows what the heck's going on and can ensure that all of the laws of the state, county, and federal government are being adhered to. But once it's on their own, there's no oversight, no control whatsoever.
Yeah, well, we just have over a minute, but Gary, is there...
Well, I disagree with what Mike just said.
Right.
Of course there's control. The control is by the funding agency or by the U.S. government. But more he does touch on a really important point, I think, and that is that the control that occurs in classified research is arbitrary and non-academic, and that causes problems as well with the sorts of results that one gets from it. Someone could just simply say, you know, good findings, I don't want them.
Yeah, but there's also like faculty can work one day off campus,
Right.
yeah? There may be like no control on theirs too, and they may have run into problems. So it's like this goes with or without classified research,
Yeah,
and the Board of Regents can do something to deal with that. Ruth?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I think one of the other issues that we haven't quite touched on here, it has to do with academic freedom. Which is implicit in some of the things that Mike has been saying. It seems to me as though the academic freedom of the researcher is one thing, but the question is whether the university as an institution should proceed with investing its own money and other
Right.
people's money in an organization that does classified research.
And especially
of this kind.
especially if this is a public institution that has a
Yes.
larger mission. So we're flat out of time. So thanks to our viewers, and thank you for coming to the studios. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thanks for having this show.